And now, if I can welcome to stage our third guest, Pradeep Philip, the founding CEO of LaunchVic, and very much looking forward to having a chat. Pradeep, I sent this question to your office, so you did get a little bit of warning. I wanted to say, first of all, you've had obviously an incredible career in government, and now you're working with startups. So my first question is, what is your 30-second elevator pitch for LaunchVic?
Great. Well, LaunchVic is quite a unique government initiative to promote startups, entrepreneurship and innovation in the economy. It's being set up as a private company, so quite a different exercise for government. We've just had our board announced, no one from government on our board. And just given the last topic, majority of our board are women, and majority of our board have been founders or investors in the startup community. So that's essentially what we are. We've been funded for 4 years to the tune of $60 million. And really, our aim is to create the conditions for success. That's our goal. As simple as that.
So, you always get asked when you're doing this, what, if we were to call your investors the Victorian taxpayers, what's your view on, your ideal ROI back to the community?
Essentially, after 4 years, I'd like Victoria to be known as the place where entrepreneurs and people with ideas want to be, and where startups are born. And working back, what are the conditions that promote that? That's really our objective.
One of the reasons, going back to the conversation with Paul, that I am very, very interested in government is because, and I mentioned in my opening, there's talk of access to superannuation funds, investing into startup environment, but probably outside of that, and a sovereign wealth fund or whatever it might be. Just general day-to-day government expenditure has got to be one of the best places for innovation to actually occur, because it seems to tick a lot of boxes for government. You've been at the coalface from a different point of view. Are you seeing, and excluding LaunchVic, do you believe you're seeing a trend towards government learning how to embrace more nimble, more agile? It's very risky terms for government typically.
Absolutely. Look, I think government is changing, undoubtedly, but generally government is changing because it's being dragged kicking and screaming to it. And at the end of the day, the one thing about government that forces change is that they are subject to the needs and wants of citizens. And just here in Victoria, our political process, every 4 years, people get to have a say. And I think there is change occurring, but it is slow. And initiatives like LaunchVic are fantastic, but in some senses, we're probably 5 years too late.
Well, I was thinking the other day, so there was obviously there's a lot of news around Uber and Airbnb maybe and businesses like that, particularly those businesses, and government's failure to effectively legislate one way or the other, leaving confusion open. And it occurred to me that an usual dialogue is, well, government's slow and these things take forever and all that kind of stuff. But then I was like, well, it's actually happened quite quickly, and the conversation is happening quite quickly. But in a lot of ways, government arguably should always be responding or needs to respond. The government couldn't have invented Uber theoretically and created legislation for it before it existed, and that will always be the case with innovation. And I wanted to capture your view on how government as a lag has to lag innovation, but how do we get results?
A bit of conservatism is a good thing. And governments are inherently conservative in that they are slow to change, and there is nothing wrong with that. But what governments need to be is at the forefront of what is going on in the real economy, in society, with people right in their own homes. And keeping abreast of that means that you can think early about the sort of things that you might need to put in place to either foster greater activity, accelerate the pace of it, and look after those who might get hurt along the way. So that's a really important consideration, but you don't get to that unless you are at the forefront of what is going on. So I think, Julie, your point about being in touch with your customer, being in touch with citizens, is a really, really important task for government. And just by the way, I don't think it's just governments that lag, big corporates lag.
Oh, yeah.
And we, just take one of the sectors, banking. 15, 20 years ago, they were caught completely unawares by all the mortgage providers. They woke up one day and suddenly found they'd lost 20% market share. And you can see the same thing happening today. Now, we talk about fintech, and you see all the major banks ticking a box because they've acquired a company in fintech, they're doing something new. But I just wonder whether most of them aren't still thinking of this play of acquiring a fintech company or whatever as a risk mitigation strategy, as opposed to, hey, this might be how we start to think about our organisation in 20 years' time. How do we transform our organisation in 20 years' time, and how do we invest now for that? There's a very different mindset. Risk mitigation, kind of hoping it'd go away or not cause too much damage, versus how do I take advantage of this?
It's interesting, you mentioned that I think Fairfax had the opportunity to buy car sales for 10 million or something like that, wasn't it? And Yahoo actually had the opportunity to buy Google for 500 million. We work with a major bank, and it's phenomenal what to see on the inside. Hugely talented people together, but when you put thousands upon thousands of talented people together, big just can never do small. So it's very interesting. I wanted to go back to the LaunchVic piece, because I think everyone in the room is excited to hear. There's not a huge amount of information in the market yet. Sure. Maybe a good place to start is how was it pitched to you?
Sorry,
how was it pitched to you?
Oh, look, I've always been interested in innovation all throughout my career, and there are things that are going on right now. I mean, there's a lot of written and spoken about innovation, right? And it's quite extraordinary how the conversation changed with new PM. But there is still a tendency for a lot of people to think of this as a bit of a fad, right? But they're wrong, right? There is something fundamental going on in the economy, right? And we're witnessing that everywhere. All the traditional big industries are being smashed, right? And they're all struggling to work out why. Right? And so for me, this is quite exciting, right? This is this morning I got to open the day down at Deacon's Edge, Federation Square. There is nothing less than an economic revolution underway, right? And it's fantastic. So when this came my way, I loved it. Now, my previous job was running health, right? And that is a classic sector just waiting to be smashed to pieces, right? Smashed to pieces for this reason. The health system is characterised by what economists would call the asymmetry of information. Doctors know, patients don't. So that power relation around information is exactly what's being smashed right now. And the health sector does not know how to deal with this, right? And yet just think of the transformation that'll occur in terms of the workforce, how people get looked after, and how people look after themselves. So this is, for me, quite an exciting thing.
And it's only going to take some bold organisations that are going to push the limits of legislation to actually start to tick that change over. When people realise there's a better option, it starts to happen. We've seen it in more lo-fi industries like transport. There's no doubt. I think health would be down the track an interesting opportunity. With LaunchVic, what it's not uncommon. Obviously, we've seen government and appropriate legislation fostering fantastic innovation around the world. People cite Israel all of the time. There are other markets. You've got probably a little bit like we have as entrepreneurs, a few things to Google, and have a look at how this all works. Because just like all the rest of us, you are now quite literally a founding CEO and have a canvas to create yourself. What do you admire internationally? What markets do you admire and structures do you admire in approaching this?
So that's a great thing. You can learn from the best that's out there. And there's a lot of things that I like from a lot of places. So you mentioned Israel. Love the culture that's created there and the innovation around finance. Right? You look at other places around the world. Look at Seattle. Right? Building an ecosystem based around values, quite different to Silicon Valley. Look at Vancouver, really focused on talent attraction compared to Toronto. Look at Berlin, very focused around brand and delivery. These are all great things. So what it says is that you can build ecosystems around particular things, but as you come later in the piece, you can borrow, beg and steal from what's worked elsewhere.
It's as you start to do that, have you identified or made any observations around where Australia's strengths are? I want to start with Australia and then Victoria, because I think that they're potentially slightly different.
So a couple of things. I think as a general rule, the ingenuity and talent in our people here is fantastic, and it's has not been exploited. Right? A lot more we can do, but we don't exploit really the talent that resides in our people. And part of that is, we are so far from the rest of the world. Our countryside is so different. You got to innovate, and you got to build your own style of innovation. And the history of Australia is that. And the second thing is, and particularly for Victoria, out of diversity, with people doing different things in different places at different scales, we have got the most livable city on the planet, here in Melbourne. Right? Rated 5 times in a row, the most livable city. Now, in a lot of industries, livability doesn't really rate. But when you think about entrepreneurship and startups and innovation, livability matters. And we put that alongside talent, that starts to give you the key conditions for success.
We've also got here in Melbourne, traditionally within the Australian marketplace, we've been known for some strengths. We know, from the agency part of our business that, we've probably got about half the big retailers here in Victoria, or half the retail industry here in Victoria, as opposed to a more standard sort of 35-40% of industry split normally. So there's just one sector. Are you looking at sector by sector things? It seems like Sydney's sort of got the run on fintech.
Yeah. Yes and no, right? A traditional way government looks at things is to look at all these verticals, these industry sectors. But in fact, things like analytics, big data, cloud computing, these horizontal movements are smashing traditional verticals. So you've got to think quite differently about these industry sectors. But let me give you one example. Right? Just take Melbourne alone. So not far from here, you've got, so north of the CBD, you've got the Parkville precinct. Right? One of the world's best hubs for biomedical research. If you walk 10 minutes south of that, you hit the design hub. Walk another 10 minutes south, you get the writers hub. You walk another 10 minutes southeast, you come to Docklands, home of our major banks, but not just banks, super funds, health insurance, right? So a finance hub. You walk from there, 15 minutes northeast, you hit the arts precinct, right? Incredible arts precinct. And 5 minutes north of that is the sports precinct. Now, just imagine the value that just resides in these locations. Now, how much more value would we get, right, when they combine in weird and wonderful ways? Right? That's the power that we can harness for this state.
I couldn't agree more. I wonder, we have some visibility into the automotive industry, and that's obviously going through tumult, big employer here. There's it seems a manufacturing revival going on in the US. There's this kind of concept of through personalisation, and actually you might have a view on this as well, Julie, but sort of, I think there's terms like new manufacturing or those sorts of things. You've got the Internet of Things enabling some of that. Do you see some real opportunities here for some of those losses, those jobs that are being lost there don't necessarily actually have to be replaced by a bunch of people writing code or guys in UX, but we may see a manufacturing revival here in Victoria?
Oh, absolutely. Advanced manufacturing is a huge potential here in Victoria. You think about all those, if you look at the supply chain of the auto industry that was here, right? Robotics, high-end manufacturing, fabrics and material science. What can they be used for? Robotics in health devices. So these skills, it's really important that we don't lose them, right? Because they can transform our industry quite enormously. And if you add to that the whole Internet of Things, there's enormous potential. Driverless cars. The big thing for driverless cars for me is it'll completely transform insurance. Right? And then we've got the home of insurance here. So how these things all interact and intersect is wonderful. You just got to try and create the right conditions for the right collisions. Probably shouldn't say collisions when you talk about the auto industry, to take place.
All those words are fine.
That's it.
It's, disruption, whatever. Just finally, I know it's very, very early days, but for everybody here, how do they get involved in LaunchVic, and what can we expect in terms of communications coming out?
Sure. And look, we've spent the last couple of months doing what I think is the right thing, getting out there, 8-10 meetings a day. The biggest, my own personal health risk has been caffeine poisoning. But just trying to learn from those who actually do things, what is it they need, and I was talking to Julie earlier about it. Now, one of the important things we ought to think about is mentoring. Right? How do you promote greater mentoring, provide support for that? Because that's, when you're a startup, you're in the unknown, and you can solve so much of the angst and get a lot of advice from people who've done it before. So we're in the middle of, now that we've got a board, we're going to have a strategic plan for the board pretty shortly. We'll have some funding rounds to announce, so we're working on guidelines. We're in fact building a website, all those really simple basic things. We're trying to find a place to move to. So we're doing all those basic things that everyone in this room kind of knows and they have to grind their way through. So in due course, and I'm talking about within a couple of months, we should have a lot more information out there and an ability for people to engage. And one of the things we're going to do is not going to do what governments typically do, have this big funding round and take forever to go through things. We're actually going to start small. We'll do something small and see how that works.
You read the Lean Startup as well? We all have.
That's right.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much to all of our speakers. Better let them have a break before we go into some Q&A and let everyone grab a drink. But if you could join me in thanking all of our three speakers for a great chat.